Nina, do you know if anybody else is joining us?
No one responded that they couldn't make it.
Is anybody else joining us?
Francis didn't say that he couldn't make it, so I think he should be here.
Okay, I just didn't want to get started without him if he's going to be here. And I take it, is there somebody from the petitioner? But we can vote on the minutes, I guess, of the last meeting. Has everybody read those minutes? Does anybody have any changes? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
I'll make one.
Okay,
Second.
Dan, second by Charles. All in favor, raise your hand. In favor? So
I wasn't there. So.
Yeah, you weren't there, right? So 4-0 is the vote. It's passed. So the next item on the agenda, I just would want to wait a minute or so. Will be the variance petition, but I want to give Fran Dean a minute or so to get here. Give him 2 or 3 more minutes, and then if he's not here, we have a quorum enough to run a meeting. Yeah. Excuse me, Nina.
That wasn't me. I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. Okay. Because we have 5 members, so we can proceed if he's not here, but I just want to, I don't want to cut him off if he's planning on being here, but I don't want to wait too long and hold these people up. Let me just get my paperwork. Oh, and by the way, Nina, I'm going to drop off to you tomorrow. I wrote up that decision for the cell tower. Took a little while to get that all done, but it's done. I meant to drop it off last Friday, but I forgot to do that. So on the way into work. What time do you get there usually?
Like 7:45, 8 o'clock.
Okay, so I'll be there sometime between 8 and 9.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, and I'll drop off the decision for you. Okay.
Thank you.
Let me get my paperwork. I'll just give him another minute so we can get going here. Get my stuff here. Nina, did we put together the annual report to get to the select board?
Yeah, that was voted on last meeting.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure it got submitted, so we're all set. But I just wanted to make sure. So it doesn't look like Fran's going to be here. So my suggestion is that we start with the hearing for the variance for the property at 14 Hidden Ponds in East Long Meadow. The applicants are Wayne and Janice Goodwin. And I think the representative is Custom Homes Development Group, Mr. Fusco. Is anybody here on their behalf?
There is someone with their hand up. I'll send them in right now.
Okay, thank you. So I want to open up the public hearing for the matter, and I want to make sure everybody's in the meeting, and I'll just sort of read the rules. So there are 5 members of the board that are present tonight. In order to get a variance, you will need to get a vote of 4 of the 5 minimum to pass. Even if you get a majority vote, that will not pass the variance. You need 4 of 5. The we'll ask, the way it'll work is the petitioner will present his or her case initially. We'll give them all the time they need to present their case. You need to show us, the reasons why we should grant you a variance, the hardship related to topography of the land in question, the public good, and it's not going to derogate from the intent or purposes of the zoning bylaw. We'll need to have that addressed. Then any other people who are there in support of the petitioner will be allowed to speak. And in each case, after someone is presented, the board members can interrupt with questions that they may have as we go. After the proponents have spoken, we'll ask anybody who's opposed to this to speak. They'll be given their time to speak, depending on, I would ask each person who does speak to give their name and address for the record. And if there are opposition and items come up in opposition from opponents, we'll give the petitioner an opportunity to rebut anything new that's different from what they proposed. So those are the rules of the road. We'll start the meeting by having someone read the minutes. Do you have the minute? Not the minutes, but read the notice that was published in the paper and sent to the abutters. Brian, do you have those?
I have the
notice.
The notice. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to read the notice into the record?
So case ZB 2022-1, a petition for variance under East Long Meadow zoning bylaw, dimensional and density regulations, table 3.2 for a 0.250 plus or minus foot relief from a 50-foot front yard setback at 14 Hidden Ponds Drive, assessor parcel ID 23-77-7 in the Residence A zoning district. Petitioner Custom Homes Development Group LLC at 515 Shaker Road, East Long Meadow. That was published on 1/20/2022 and 1/27/2022.
Okay. And notices, what do we have Nina in the record that notices were sent to everybody within 300 feet, certified mail?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
Yep.
So, based on that, we'll put those into the record, that jurisdictionally we meet the jurisdictional requirements. So if somebody wants to speak for the petitioner, I guess there's some plans. What I would suggest is that we put in on the application, the plans that were submitted. I guess there were two plans. One was the plans as initially designed and given to the building department. And then there was a second set that was given that shows what actually got built versus what was done. And I believe we have those, and I'd like to enter those in as exhibits 1 and 2. If that's possible, the original being the plan as presented initially, and then what was actually built as a result. I think the first plan showed 51.2 feet from the road. The second plan showed 49.7, which is the reason for the variance. There is also a picture of what is of the house that's been erected on the property, so that we can see what that is. I would ask that be exhibit C, which shows the location of the garage, the road, and the home. And then I would ask for exhibit 4 would be a letter dated January 22nd, 2022 from Al Joyce, and I'll read that into the record. We own several properties, Deal Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. We own several properties on Hidden Ponds Drive and have a vested interest in all the houses being constructed. We are in favor of granting this variance. The granting of this variance will not have a negative impact on neighboring properties. Very truly yours, Rosebud Builders by Al Joyce, and it's Ray, the public hearing variance request 14 Hidden Ponds Drive.
Well, Mark, is this a variance for construction that's already occurred?
Yes. What happened here was the plan showed it to being 51.2 feet, which would have not required a variance. Somehow, when the house got built, it ended up being 49.7 feet from the road, and they're required 50. So it's a 0.3 variance, somewhat de minimis, but it's still a 0.3 variance. But the house and the garage, as you can see by the pictures, are already built.
How and that happened just out of a survey?
Somebody whoever measured, put in the foundations and stuff, didn't quite measure correctly. Now I don't know where they measured from, but when they did the closest point, the part of the problem is you can see it's on a curve, so that if you ran straight out from the thing.
Well, we'll let the petitioner explain it.
Yeah. But I think that's probably the reason why that occurred, because the curve gets closer at certain points, and whoever measured it didn't measure from the closest point. But we'll have the petitioner give us a reason. I have no idea, but it did occur. So.
Well, because it certainly changes the way you look at this.
No, I understand.
Am I can I be heard?
Yes.
Okay, so what happened was,
Your name and address, please.
my name is Chris Doobie. I'm from Custom Homes. My
Okay.
address is 10 Whitford Place, but our business is 515 Shaker Road, East Long Meadow. What happened was, as we were setting to do the foundation, the customers and us had looked at the topography of the land and decided that it would be a much easier entry to the garage if they put the garage with the doors on the front versus a side entry. And so when they changed it, we didn't realize that it changed the footprint to go a few inches too close. And that's how it ended up happening. And it's actually caused quite a great deal of mishap for the customers, because now the bank is giving them a hard time releasing funds, and we're trying to keep this project moving forward.
Okay.
And
I just am a little concerned there, because the first plan that was submitted to the building department always showed the driveway as a straight shot.
maybe that was not the initial plan. I don't know.
Well, I don't know that it showed 51.2.
Well, I think
And-
that maybe we submitted it after we had that discussion with the customers. Based on the topography, and Mark, who is the foundation guy, and we had Levesque surveying out there. Everybody was supposed to make sure that it was 50 feet away, and we're 0.3 of a foot too close. So
I
So
understand.
what is it again? The dimension? So they're off by how much?
0.3 of a foot.
0.3 of a foot?
Yeah.
0.3 of a foot.
3 inches.
So
3 inches.
probably just my opinion here, because I sympathize with the guy. I'm a builder myself, although this has never happened to me. But the problem we're going to have is, how do you fix this? Okay, because under a variance, you know what the requirements are. If we were to, even though we're probably all inclined to fix this, because it ought to be fixed, how do you do this without imperiling us in the future? Because you're going to grant a variance because somebody made a mistake. There is no way you can find under the conventional and acceptable means for a variance here, the way I see it.
Well, don't they have in the one of the acceptable reasons for granting a variance that it would cause financial hardship on the?
No.
Well, that's part of the second test. It's part of, the hardship.
It does not
It's got to be related.
Doesn't apply on construction that has occurred after the fact. Okay, not at all.
Well,
in other words, the financial hardship relates to, in order to comply with zoning, the expense in complying with it initially, before you start your construction, would be too high. Building on ledge, having to blast, having a house that faced in a direction that made no sense. Those kinds of things. In this case, and I understand where you're going with it, but what I'm trying to explain to you is that legally it doesn't work here, because the house could have been built to comport with zoning and wasn't. So now you've got to find it.
Yeah, we didn't know. We used, like I said, Levesque survey.
Look, the objective here is not to spank the people who made the mistake. The mistake was made, and I'd love to try to find a way to fix it. But what I'm saying, and I'm saying it mostly to our chair, who is an attorney, because I am not. But I've been embroiled in my own land use issues my life, because I'm a commercial developer. we got to be careful how we do this, because you don't want the problem with variances is that they're supposed to be sacrosanct. They're supposed to be things that are given out not all that often. When you're variant, a variance is should be a harder thing to get than a special permit or a license or a special permission or whatever. So that's the problem. It's the mechanics of doing it. It's not, there's not going to be anybody here, I would imagine, to object to this. I don't think there's a member here to this board that has a fundamental disagreement with it. My concern is how you mechanically effectuate it.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like to me that the house was located, and that probably is what caused the problem, is when they relocated the house and moved it a little bit to the north, from what I can see on the two plans, that they just figured, oh, they we're just moving it in the same line, and the original line was 51.2 feet, but when you moved it that one extra, because it was 20,
But what do you do
21 feet
about it
and then
now?
20.6. Well, that's what I'm saying. When you moved it at 6 inches, because of the curve in the road, it moved it much closer to the sideline than was originally proposed, because the curve gets closer at that point. And I think that's what probably created the issue.
And if this
whoever
was
did it
not,
just didn't measure that when they
if
did
this
that.
was not new construction,
Yeah,
and it wasn't screwing up the financing, maybe we could find a way to just leave it a non-conforming lot or something like that. But here, I remember in Hartford, Connecticut, once a planner forced me to pull a building forward of the building line in the city, and my surveyor missed it. My engineer missed it. The planner lost his job over it, and the city fixed it by moving the building line. So that, because my footings were already in, because it wasn't my fault. In this case, you can sort of pin some blame on somebody, but it doesn't do anybody any good. Is there any other way through town engineering we could? I guess you're right.
Well, I mean, the only issue that I guess I have, I mean, I think you do have some sort of a hardship, as I said, and I think it's more of an error in terms of a hardship, not a hardship related to the land, but whoever did the shifting of the property to the north didn't take into account that by shifting it that 6 inches, that it would make that much of a difference. And it did. I mean, because the road gets
but
closer.
how does that, the problem is, if what I'm saying,
no, I'm just saying,
if I'm asked to vote tonight on a variance based on a hardship based on topography, shape, or soil condition of this property, I'm going to vote against it.
right. No, and the only thing they possibly would have was, and it was a given beforehand, was the fact that the road curve was there, was always shown, and whoever calculated the house and moved it to the north didn't realize that by moving it to the north, that they were moving it because the curve gets closer to the house at that point, the way the curve is run. And because of that, I believe that's what the mistake was. I mean, and that's why I think you've got such
right. So it's a mistake. So now
it's a mistake. Clearly it's a mistake. And I think it's related because of the way the curve came in closer, and whoever did the calculation just, messed it up. I mean, that's really all I could say.
I got a question reviewing those two documents. This may just be because it's a printed document.
Yeah.
But were those points measured exact to exact from both times? Because you look at instance one before the change, where it's 51 feet or whatever.
Yeah.
And you look at the distance from the line where it's actually marking it to is further than the second one, which now it's closer, making it a different measurement. Now, I don't know if that, it just could be the way that it's just printed on the paper and that's what it is.
I can't speak to that. I mean, I don't know. I'm just looking at it because
You
it looks like it went about 60. Yeah. If you look at the southerly line of the house.
Christopher, how have you confirmed these measurements? Has this been confirmed more than once?
It has. They went back out and measured it after the fact. Initially, it was brought to our attention by the bank because they wouldn't release any funds after they realized that
you encroached.
And then we were. I mean, at this point, the framing is done. Like, I mean, the house is I would say 80% done, and we're kind of in a pickle at this point. I don't know exactly what other avenue we have other than this proceeding. I mean, what else can I do?
I don't know, unless if these other folks would vote to give you a variance with me not voting for you and it gets it to you, that's about the only thing I can recommend. I can't, there's just no legal concept here to do it unless somebody tells me that there is. I was kind of hoping Mark would say, you know what? We
Well,
can do it.
I
We
mean,
got case
Dan,
law
as
where-
best you can, I'm not so worried about setting a precedent because this is such a minor variance, 3/10 of a foot. But it is what it is. It's somewhat de minimis. There was a mistake made.
Well, if it's de
Clearly, it was a
minimis,
mistake.
if it's de minimis, Mark, why can't we get the town engineer to just call it de minimis?
Because
Well,
he was presented with a plan showing a violation. That's the problem. So the building inspector had to turn it down because it's not 50 feet. But it is somewhat de minimis. So I'm not as worried about setting a precedent here in terms because you won't have a lot of other cases. It's like 0.3 or less. It does set a precedent for that. But from a point of view, I do agree with you. But I've run into one.
If Mark, if this was a special permit or anything other than a variance, we wouldn't even.
Yeah, but I've had it in other towns where we had something similar to this. Whoever built the whole subdivision, they didn't discover it until 10 years after the fact. Every house in the subdivision was because whoever measured for every house that got built, they measured from the actual curbing, not the street line. And so that what happened is every house was within the setback requirement, and it was a sizable mistake. It was a good.
But there,
10
Mark, you've got.
Yeah, we had 15 houses that were all and innocent people that didn't make the mistakes. They just happened to be living there, and whoever the builder was, whoever they're put in their foundations.
Yeah, but Mark, that's not the case here. The
no, I know. I understand.
on the property with a house that's not finished.
Yeah.
And
I understand.
You got a house that's encroaching on a line on the most difficult relief that this board gives.
Yeah.
And I'm not a guy to stand on ceremony. I'm not an academic. I'm in Mr. Doobie's shoes often myself, and yet I can't find a way to justify granting a variance here. I wish I could. Maybe is there a way for this to be call it a non-conforming and the town agree that it will live with it?
So let's go back to why was that change made again?
Well, non-conforming has to be legal, Dan, to start with. So you can't have a non-conforming lot because a non-conforming lot would have been in existence legally before. So we don't meet the requirement there. I mean, here it's just a matter of whether or not you want to set a precedent because I don't see a hardship. It was a mistake that was clearly made. I could see how the mistake was made, that somebody, when they were doing the people a favor, they moved it a little bit to the north to accommodate the grades, I guess. I'm not sure exactly why it was moved that area, but as a result of moving it to the north,
let's let the rest of
the road.
I've been doing too much talking. Let's let these other guys talk.
So. But
Jim or Charles or Brian, anybody got it?
Yeah, Mark, I don't know if you can confirm, but in terms of the setback for East Long Meadow, it's from the lot line, right? Not from the street line. I mean,
it's from the lot line, which is the street line. The street line, the street line, when they pave a street, typically the street is maybe 30 feet wide. It's a 50-foot right of way. So there's usually about 10 feet on either side of the roadway that is still part of the public way. And so when you measure in, you're supposed to measure from that 10-foot in line from where the actual street, if you looked at it, you would think the street is where the curbing is. It isn't. It's usually about 10 feet. Sometimes it's smaller, but you'd have to look at the subdivision plan, but it usually is about 10 feet. And so that's where you measure from your lot line at that point.
I could be
Mr.
wrong. I thought it was 25 feet from the
I feel like
center.
they had a pretty good buffer on, especially on the arc. I don't know if they're gonna have sidewalks there or if there was a consideration as to potentially changing the actual lot line a little closer to the street, if that's feasible, especially because it's on a, appears to be a cul-de-sac, or at least the
It
arc.
hasn't,
don't-
I mean, it's still a private way, correct?
It is at this point, I believe it is.
So I guess the only question I have is, because it is a street line, is whether or not you guys could actually do an amendment before the planning board and jog the street a hair out at the street line and asked for somewhat, if you have to have a 50-foot, you would, because they have it, I believe, without giving you a variance, the right to correct
That
the street.
administratively.
Yeah. The customer,
and
the customer
administratively.
purchased, excuse me, sorry. The customer purchased the lot. We're not actually the developer. And, I can't believe, that this occurred, to be honest with you. And I'm begging you guys to have mercy on, it's an old retired couple. They're downsizing, trying to sail off into retirement. And this could be a huge problem for them. And,
Yeah, no, the only question I had is the original developer. I don't know if
We're
whoever
not.
set that out, whether you could ask to amend and change that curve on the roadway, because you're not going to actually change the macadam of the roadway. That one area, you move it 3/10 of a foot, and you would ask the planning board to accept the new, the new drawing. So it might move it a hair, closer to the street. So instead of having maybe a 10-foot area between the side of the actual street and the street line, you would have, 9.7 feet or whatever it is to get you within the requirements that you need.
It seems to me that relief is achievable. I mean, I'm not an expert, but that's similar to what the city of Hartford did in my case. So if the street has not yet been accepted by the town,
It's not.
then it's a good time to do this. I
Well,
know it's not something.
and I understand, but they also have to understand when they do move it, they are creating lot, and so they gave rights over the street. So it's a little more difficult there, and it can be done. I don't know what was reserved. I haven't done the title of this, whether the developer reserved the fee, because don't forget they grant easements in those quote ways, and whether the other people in the subdivision would be willing to give up their easement in that 3/10 of a foot.
Well,
Chris, what's in the center? It looks like from the drawing that I see that there's a circular.
Yeah, it's a cul-de-sac, basically. I
Cul-de-sac.
think it isn't it a cul-de-sac at the end of the street?
Yes,
Is
it
that
is. And they're right
comparable?
at the edge of the
Yeah.
cul-de-sac where it begins. And that's
Yeah.
probably how, like you said, when they moved it 6 inches, because the cul-de-sac starts to curve right there.
Right.
That's probably how it became.
And I think that's how it came. But what we have to, in order to grant the variance, we have to find some sort of a hardship. And typically you can't create your own hardship.
well, that's
This
what
is
you'd be
sort of
doing here.
your
If you
situation
grant-
that we got.
Yeah, that's what you would be doing here, is granting your own hardship.
Typically. So one of the issues is you theoretically could move the line, whoever the developer is, and I don't know how many lots he sold out at this point. If he still owns most of the lots, it isn't a big problem, but it sounds like he sold some to Rosebud, but it sounds like Rosebud would probably be easy to get along to. I just don't know how many people own the lots in the subdivision, how many lots have been sold at this point and are still in, how many people you're involved with there. Because they would probably have to consent to the granting of the, the change in the plan.
Mark, the recommendation I would make to the petitioner is that he consult, or your client consult, whoever it is that's going to do this, consult with a civil engineer to determine if the mechanics of this will work. And then I think if you work with the planning board, that they would, because they probably have the power to do this, and because I don't think we do. I don't think we have the ability to do this, even as much as I want to do it, and I would if I could. If I could be convinced that this was deserving of a variance the way they're supposed to be handed out, I would do it.
No, but you can see the line where the street is, which is the sort of the heavier line where the actual macadam is. And then you can see the actual street line, which is the thinner line where they do their runoff from. But you can see the distance, and it wouldn't make much difference there. But it's the only concern is if you convey out and you gave people easements over the ways as shown originally on the plan, you may have to get releases from those people of that, whatever they're giving up. That's all.
It's cheaper and
Legally.
easier than moving the house.
No, I don't disagree. I'm just saying, but I don't know. You get one neighbor who's a jerk and it may be a problem. That's all.
Is there any way that any of you can think of a hardship that this is creating? I mean, I thought that we had a hardship because it's going to create significant financial impact on is there any other?
That has to happen before you build it. That hardship.
I think, quite frankly, if you go and see if you can change the lot line or not, and you come back and say that's not possible for whatever reason it is, whether it's the town, whether it's the planning board, the developer, or the abutters, if you come back and say, listen, we've exhausted every other alternative aside from literally knocking the house down, that may be a different situation. But for me, at least personally, as long as that opportunity is there, or at least to inquire as to whether or not changing the lot line is possible, I don't think you've exhausted every potential alternative aside from knocking it down. And that's just my opinion.
If you look at this right in the center of that cul-de-sac where it says W for the water line, there's nothing going to go in the middle there. It's just going to be an island, isn't it?
It's currently grass. It's
grass, yeah.
It's a road.
There's not going to be anything.
I don't think you're going to redo the road, Brian. I
nothing's
think they're
gonna
just going to alter the quote street line, which is
It's a paper
paper
Right.
line at this point. However, at some point, that's the line that if they're going to put sidewalks or utilities within that area, that's the area they'd be building them in.
Right, but my point is, there's nothing in the middle that's going to affect another building lot because there's nothing being built in that middle piece.
No, they won't
That's
affect
before
any
needs to be
building
adjusted.
lot other than it affects people's easements. It's a de minimis, but I've dealt with people in the past. Sometimes you get somebody who's a jerk and you ask them, they have to give up something and they basically, try to hold you up for it.
So
But nobody
basically,
really would because that middle lot isn't.
if you're going to give some land to a lot, you got to take some away from somewhere else.
Right. Here, it's only taking away an easement.
But
because
it requires
everybody-
that you write a letter to all these people and you give
Right.
everybody an opportunity to be difficult, which is
Right.
your point, Mark. And I agree with you but that's part of what you got to do when you make a mistake. I mean, I don't mean to be flippant, but this is a mistake that somebody's going to have to pay for by doing some work.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't think it's going to affect another property owner because that middle part, nobody's going to build on. And if all they have to do is adjust.
It won't take any
that curve
property.
is-
It's what happens is you technically, as a homeowner, have a right to use the whole street is laid out. The street is laid out. When you look at the plan, goes to that line, the hard line there, that was on the. So if you look at the thing, there's like a double line that marks the boundaries of the actual paved part of the street, Brian.
Yeah,
And then you have the actual street line is the solid line from which they measure.
right.
And you're gonna have to move that 0.3 of a foot inward.
I know,
At
but
least at that location. I mean, you may not have to do it the whole area. It may just be a small area. But when you if I bought a lot up here, I have a right to use that whole area to put my utilities in, et cetera. So now I'm gonna have 0.3 less of a foot of my easement that I have. I have a right to use your lot for that purpose.
It's like the world that Mark and I come from in condos trying to take common area. You'd be doing the same thing with all the units, right? You'd
They
have to
were
go to
given an
everybody and
easement
get
is
permission.
really basically what's happened. They were given a right to use that and you're taking away that. I wouldn't do that. You don't need to do the whole line, but you'd have to bulge it in a little bit, right where the area, is there. How much? I mean, 0.3 of a foot isn't going to make much of a difference, but I technically, from a legal point, I think you'd probably have to get the people to release their easements. I just don't know how far they're along in terms of conveying out lots. If he owns all the lots, it isn't an issue.
Well, I think most of the houses are already built, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that's what I saw. A bunch of them were up. So but I don't, I don't know who's done it. I don't think anybody, but I don't know the people there. And you get one person who's a jerk, it could create a real problem.
Okay, so at this,
But my suggestion is, let's see if you could do something like that, continue this hearing to give you an opportunity to look at whether that could be done.
Okay.
And then, yeah, if you beside the attempts, I mean, it's an issue with this board. Clearly, there's a whole issue of whether or not it's a legitimate variance. I'm not too concerned about a precedent because I think it's such a de minimis one. There have been, you grant the variance, it doesn't get appealed. Whether you did it rightfully or wrongfully, it's a variance. It can be used as precedent in the future. That's how it works. But you
Well,
know,
but
you don't want to be
beyond that,
setting up
Mark,
a bunch of precedent.
beyond that, look, there's law, and the law is clear on how variances are to be granted and the circumstances under which they're granted. And I think we got to take that seriously.
No, and I understand, and I think it's the issue that comes down here is somebody made a mistake. The house got built. It would technically entail, removing 3/10 of a foot of possibly the foundation and the garage and the corner and angling. And I have no idea what that would cost. But that, I suspect it's just that corner of the garage that might have to be, would have to be cut back or so you don't have an encroachment.
Well, let's hope it doesn't get to that. Let's encourage the petitioner to get with his surveyor, his land use attorney, get with the town engineer or the town planning, or whoever it is in the town that deals with this. I don't know who it is, and figure out a way to do this. I'm relatively confident there's a way to do it. I hope so, because
I don't know what the developer reserved his rights. That's all, because I haven't done the title to these pieces. So if he reserved the rights to change the ways and do stuff in his deeds, then he'd have an absolute right without anybody's consent. And
which
if
you may
everybody
have.
agreed to it,
You gotta
and
go-
I
you gotta
don't
go
know.
do-
That's
yeah.
what I'm saying. I don't know.
Got to check.
This was the avenue we were told to pursue.
Yeah, well, normally it is. In terms of what's here. Here, your biggest problem is,
Your house is already built.
yeah.
Correct.
Well, it was clearly
That's
you
your
created.
biggest problem.
Yeah,
I came here tonight thinking we were going to be considering a variance for a new subdivision. I was kind of puzzled. A new subdivision needing a variance. That's generally not. They generally don't go together. And then I come to find out that the house is built. It's not the first time I've seen this, and I sympathize with it. I really do. But it just can't be that because people make mistakes that municipal boards or bodies in power should look the other way, because whether it's precedent setting or not, the public has a right to expect that its civil
bylaws will be
servants are
enforced.
going to do things the right way. And that's just how, even when it works against me, and it has, believe me, I've been on the other side many, many times, told no, told to go do it a different way. That's the way it is.
So, but I mean, that's my suggestion. Whether when you come back, that'll change the vote. I have no idea. That's up to the members as to what they would do.
Well, if we vote tonight,
if I vote tonight, I suspect you would not get it tonight.
Right.
And I mean, you could do your vote. The problem that you come back is typically when you're denied, you can't come back for 2 years with the same requirement. So,
which is why you should leave this open. Mark's advice is good. We continue this. That way you don't have to pay another fee, and you can come back. And then, if you come back and you're in the same place you are tonight, I don't know that I'm in any different of a place. But if you come back, and maybe, between lawyers and civil engineers, somebody figures out a way for us to do this where it doesn't run afoul of the spirit of the law, degrade from the intent, which this clearly would if we granted it under these circumstances, then I would consider that. So you should that's what I would do. I would leave.
So with that being said, the suggestion, it sounds like, just go and exhaust every resource, see what we can do. And if it comes back that we're not going to be able to do anything, and it's we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, you guys would sympathize with that, is what you're telling me. Is that correct or no?
well, I'm not so sure everybody would sympathize. I can't tell you that it would definitely be. But I think I've heard it clearly from, at least Jim, that he might look at it a little bit differently if you would tried to exhaust your other remedies.
Chris-
But, you know, don't forget, Dan could vote and be outvoted 4-1 and you get your variance.
Chris, I think we're incredibly sympathetic to what's going on.
Okay.
But I think what you've heard from this board is, you know, brainstorming about creative ways to do things.
Right.
But Dan's point is a good one. We've got the rules to follow, and I'm looking at the application, and on your application on that there are circumstances related to the soil conditions, shape, topography which affect the land or structures in question. You put NA, like, but you've got to prove that. It is very much applicable. You've got to prove that. I think it's NA in that you can't prove it, which puts us in a really big bind. So I think, nobody wants to be in the position that you're in right now, right?
I mean, 'cause your options are either you take the corner of the garage, angle it such that you take away the 3/10 away, but now you have like instead of a square corner, you've now cut off your corner and you angle it.
Mhm.
What you would have to do and how to rebuild that, I don't know. That's not going to be cheap. But on the other hand, it would be in compliance, and wouldn't even have to come back to us to do that. I have no idea what that costs, but
ultimately the homeowner has recourse. The homeowner, and I don't mean this negatively, Chris, but the homeowner, elderly or otherwise, any homeowner is entitled to the same rights under the law. They have a contract with somebody, and somebody's got insurance that'll end up covering the cost to fix this, however it gets fixed. At least in my experience, somebody's error on his own omissions policy, and my job isn't here to give legal advice. I'm no lawyer, but somebody made a mistake, and the party that made the mistake needs to be responsible for that. By getting involved.
I'm actually thinking about that a lot, to be honest with you. I know that there's going to be costs, and quite frankly, I don't want those costs to be transferred to the customer because, as I mentioned, this is their retirement home. I just want to see them happy with everything smooth sailing, but obviously we're not there yet, and hopefully we can get there.
Yeah, I don't know.
If you can get everybody involved to pitch in a little bit, you can probably get them to come up with the money to fix it physically. But to do this administratively, by moving lines, as Mark is suggesting, it may sound a little far-fetched, and it might end up being that way. But that is the next thing that I would try to do, especially.
So where do I go for changing the line? I don't even really know.
Well, whoever laid out the subdivision, what you would try to do is change the street line, because it's not a public way yet, and so it's still a private way. You just may need.
Mark, I think the question he's really asking, or the answer he really needs, is
the planning.
How do you do it? You should have an attorney do it. You should have an attorney.
Well, you need a surveyor and an attorney, the two together working, because they'll tell you. One tells you how to do it physically, so you can get the 0.3 feet and have as little disruption to the road as possible, but keep it smooth. And then you would need potentially a variance from the planning board, but they have it within their authority to grant variances for the size of the road. So you do an amended plan. They don't have to find the hardship related to the topography of the land. They can just grant it in a particular circumstance. That's within their power. Under their rules and regulations, they have the right to waive those requirements. So you would say, instead of having a 50-foot road in that one location for a distance of 10 feet, it's going to be 49.7 feet, and the rest is going to be 50 feet. The only problem legally is if you've conveyed out, people have been given rights in that 0.3 feet that you're giving up, and may screw up your title. That's the only issue.
But an attorney will be able to figure that out. In other words, Chris, if what you're asking is, how do I do this? I'm a builder. I'm not an attorney. I get it. So what you would do, you'd hire an attorney like Mark, a land use, somebody that deals with land use and zoning, the same kinds of attorneys that Rosebud uses to go to the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board to get their approvals. They're all over Springfield. We're not allowed to make recommendations. So, but that's what you would do. And that attorney would probably get a surveyor involved, or the surveyor that's already on the property. You explain to them exactly what the problem is. This is what happened. We went to the zoning board. The zoning board said we don't have sufficient grounds to grant a variance. They suggested we try to move lines. Is there any way you see here to effectuate this? Find out what they say. That's what you do.
Mark, what are you doing tomorrow? Just kidding.
I have a little bit of a conflict.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So.
All right. Well, I appreciate.
So what my
advice.
suggestion is we can, I just don't know how long you need a continuance for, and I, you know.
I
So why
mean,
don't we
gotta
just
get-
give them, let's
I gotta
give them a, can we give them a 90-day continuance, 60-day continuance?
Well, he'd
I
have
would
to
prefer to be less.
consent. I mean, if it can be done within 30 to 60 days, I mean, we have another meeting every 30 days, so it would be
Right.
the the second Monday of of March, right?
Right. No, and I'd love to get all of our ducks in a row before the next meeting because, quite frankly, the customers are eager to move in and
Yeah,
we're
no, I
getting
understand.
close. And I don't want to hold them back any further based on an error that I'm not even sure who's responsible for at this point.
Yeah, I just think somebody tried to accommodate moving the house a hair and didn't think about the fact that the curb made it a little closer, I think is really what happened. But, we're not here to bail out people who make mistakes. We have to find, I mean, and I don't think there's anybody here in opposition. I mean, because even if we found in your favor tonight, and if somebody appealed it, we probably wouldn't be doing you any favors because it'd get tied up in the courts and you have a good chance of losing because there's no hardship related to the topography. You created your own hardship here, whoever did it. I mean, you've got, is it the surveyor? Is it the builder? Is it the person who put the foundation? And I have no idea who did what. But somebody, messed up here.
But that's how you get things like this fixed, is when the person who is ultimately responsible is confronted with that responsibility and understands that the only way they're going to extricate themselves from the situation is to deal with it, either by, turning it over to their insurance company or, coming over with a saw and a hammer and fixing it,
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't have the answer, either way, but I mean, I think it could be looked at that way, or you do it physically, you just take that corner off, a small 3/10 is not going to be a huge amount, but I don't know what it looks like aesthetically. Instead of having a square corner, you're going to have instead of coming here together, you're going to cut off, a triangle on it and you'll be in compliance.
Right.
Mark, can I make a motion that we grant the petitioner as much time as we can stack?
Well, we have to get their consent because we have to make a decision within 100 days. So he'd have to consent to extending our time to make a decision. Otherwise, it's granted by our inaction.
Well, so we'll give him as much time as.
Right. No, but he's got to consent to that if that's okay.
Well, that's how much time would you like?
Well, I mean, if 90
I mean, we can continue it.
well, I would like to have it
60
done
day.
sooner.
I mean,
I
we
would
can
suggest-
continue it a month. I mean, we're gonna, do we have any other hearings coming up next month, Nina?
Nothing scheduled. The next meeting is on March 14th.
So I
I
guess
would
the
ask
question
you
is,
that.
would you?
Sorry, I suggest you continue it a month, and if you need more time, just putting in writing.
Yeah.
But if you continue it for 60 days and it only takes you 30 days, we can't bring it forward, but we can obviously push it back with your permission. So I think if
sounds
you
good.
continue 30 days, see where we stand, and then
Yeah,
if
be
you
a
just
little
need more
over 30
time.
days. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I will make that motion.
Do we have a second on that motion? Second. All in favor, raise your hand.
Mark, just to be
Aye.
clear, continue to March 14th.
14th meeting, yeah. And it'd be continued at 60. You'd be the first hearing on if there's a hearing. Well, obviously we'll have a hearing. If you don't, aren't able to make it, let us know and we'll push it back. When's the next meeting after that, Nina?
I don't have the date off the top of my head.
Because we got to watch out because, Patriots Day runs in there.
The next one's April 11th.
Okay,
After
so
that.
it's before Patriots Day. Okay, it'll be Monday before. So, If you can't make it the 14th, the next one would be April 11th.
Okay,
Chris, okay?
yep.
I don't, so that's what we're up against. So
Christopher, I'm sorry about this is happening, man. This kind of stuff is no fun.
This
Oh,
sucks.
we've been down this road with many other things. Between my business partners and I, we
Okay.
run 4 different companies, and we have almost 70 employees that work out of our office on Shaker Road. We run into problems all the time.
I've always said in my professional life to people I work with in the construction business, the most dangerous time of building any building is when you're coming out of the ground. And this is why.
Right.
You know, if you don't get your 4 corners right, if your surveyor doesn't pin the corners right and you build a building wrong, it can, and when it's a commercial building, especially, it's a world of hurt. And so I always make absolutely sure that I'm on with that. And I'm sure you'll never be involved in this mistake again. You'll make sure of it.
No, sir. You got that right.
Right. All right. I hope that it works out for you, and I'll do anything and everything I can legally do to do that.
So all in favor, raise your hand. Brian? So it looks to be unanimous, so that it's been continued, and you've accepted the fact that we won't have a decision potentially within the 100 days of the submittal of your application. That's all.
He's waiving that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, hopefully you'll have an answer for us on the 14th. But as I said, you won't have to come back on the 14th if your decision is we're just gonna, take a hammer and nails out and we're gonna fix that corner so we're not in violation. I mean,
I can't say what we're gonna do yet. I'll figure it out.
No, that'll be your decision. You got to look at what's the most effective way for you guys to proceed if you can't get a variance.
Especially if the house isn't done. Is that the house is framed and sided?
It's
It's
framed,
up.
sided, windows are in, roof's on.
The exterior is all done.
Rough electrical, rough plumbing's done. Drywall, I think, is going in. We're like I said, we're about 80% there.
Yeah, you're just gonna have to push, that corner there. Would have to take out shave back some studs and maybe put new ones in. I don't know, and create a weird. I don't know how you do it.
That isn't anything he wants to envision.
No, nobody wants to do that. I understand.
I'm gonna exhaust every other resource first, and then if we have to do that.
That's the way you got to do it. There's an old adage: if you don't ask, you don't get. So you got to try.
Appreciate your time, fellas.
Well, thank you guys.
You all set, everybody?
Is anybody else present? We should give the opposition a chance to speak if there's anybody opposing. I just want to have it on the record. Is anybody here to speak in opposition?
I don't see anyone with their hands up.
Okay. So the meeting has been continued. And I'll drop off tomorrow, Nina, for you, the decision for you to write up. If you would, or type up for me, if you would. Okay.
All right. We all set?
Yep.
Motion to close the public meeting and adjourn.
Yep. Second, Charles, all in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
All in favor. So it's continued. We'll see you guys on March 11th. No, March 14th. I'm sorry. March 14th at 6:30 p.m. And it will continue Zoom, I assume.
Right.
So, okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
See you.